Comenzamos. Buenas tardes a todos y a todas. Mi nombre es Germán Ruiz Pérez. Vamos, a mi derecha está Max Rovira. Vamos a iniciar la sesión de esta tarde del Seminario Internacional Alianza de Civilizaciones, Alianza por la Paz, con una serie de ponencias a modo de taller llamada bajo el
as a kind of atelier or workshop.
Educación, Juventud y Género.
Education, youth and gender. We also wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to also greet all the internet surfers who are following us and who are a bigger number than the people right now in the room. We know there are hundreds of people watching the webcast of this session in the internet, so I also want to thank these people for their patience and also apologize for the small delay we've had. You know, it's the usual thing to find after a lunch, Spanish style. You know that it's always difficult to get back to work. I'm going to start by referring to the subject of education. Let me show to you a small diagram of my speech. First, I will be talking about the starting point of what the working hypothesis underlying this small project is. This is a case study of the distant course on Islamic culture, civilization, and religion. Some of them already know it, but I nevertheless wanted to introduce this course to our audience as a practical example of what the Alliance of Civilizations might be. Third, we will refer to the results of this experience, and last, we will make a final conclusion as the final detail to add. And after this short introduction, I'm going to refer to the starting point, the hypothesis we formulated over an element we consider to be indispensable for the Alliance of Civilizations to take shape, even if among ourselves, also in the academic world, people are discussing about if this term is adequate or not, is the most idoneous, because if you refer to an alliance, you're presupposing that there should be a prior confrontation, and civilizations seems to refer to opposed worlds, and there are many people who think that there's just one single civilization, which is human civilization, sharing specific values. And it's also true that we've got to use this term because it is the term which allows us to that allows us all to know what we're referring to. As it's been now, it's a coin term. And then we've got another postulate that education may help overcoming intercultural and interreligious barriers and make a very positive contribution to the so-called Alliance of Civilizations. I've got to highlight here as well that we're talking also about education through the internet, because at this case study we started from a very specific experience, which is a distance course following what now is referred to as e-learning. It is learning through the internet, and with that we link up with the posture defended by José Contreras this morning when he referred to the strategic element the internet is, which helps to mutual understanding and intercultural dialogue and interreligious dialogue. We know that in this experience, the Internet played a fundamental role, especially because following this distance learning model, we could gain access to people very far away from each other, to destinations very scattered throughout the world, and to people who had their own professional activity. And thanks to this distant education model, in their free time, they could, at home, dedicate some time to accede to this platform and to the different contents. This specific course is this distance course on cultural civilization and Islamic religion. It's a semi-distance course. There was an initial meeting at the opening ceremony, and there was another contact session in March, apart from another voluntary contact session additional to those two. So the students could study from home, and what student would do was to receive printed material, hard copied, and also a CD-ROM. They were going to be given some guidelines on the functioning of the course, and also through the Internet they would be able to choose among different options to communicate. For example, discussion fora, chat sessions, sometimes emails, and all those practical communication tools, which we'll see later on how they become materialized.
El perfil del alumnado hasta ahora ha sido muy heterogéneo.
Covered 500 hours. The profile of students was very diverse. This is the third edition of the course. It followed an academic, professional profile, very heterogeneous. The average age of students was around 38. The span covered between 16 and 67 years old. The first edition covered about 150 students. The second edition, we increased that amount in about 30%, reaching up to 200 students. Most of them were living in Spain, but there were also students from other European countries, and also some of them were to be found in Latin America. Thanks to this distance learning model, we had access to a very heterogeneous profile. They were, among them, professionals of many kinds. There's an important group of journalists, intercultural mediators, directors of foundations, people with a high profile in terms of human relations, people who are in contact. We are in contact with Muslim people and needed to get in contact with the culture. Also, people from the law enforcement forces. We always kept discretion with regards to the origin or the professional profile of students. It was in our questionnaire. It was just a voluntary question, but some of them were so kind so as to answer that specific question. The experience was a pioneering one out of a series of aspects. First, it's a Spanish public university, the one offering these courses also with religious content, and right now is the biggest in Europe with more than 200,000 students.
También otro aspecto que le daba una característica.
Another aspect which made this course to be very specific. The teaching staff was made up of Muslim leaders. of the Islamic communities, heading them Mansour Escudero, and they are the ones, the specialists, the experts who taught on religious issues, especially from a scientific and academic point of view, and also from an experimental point of view. And also, I want perhaps you question which would be the religion of our students, and perhaps the percentage of our Muslim students was between 5 to 10%, and it was a great source of satisfaction for us because we are bridging a gap between Muslims, non-Muslims, following the line of the dialogue among civilizations. I do want to state that we feel very proud, we feel very satisfied for having collaborated with great professionals from the Islamic Committee, and we also say that in our papers when we talk about this course, because they showed the professionalism. Also, they showed that the authors of papers of their own, papers which have been used for this course and which enjoyed very high quality. And the professional profile of teachers had to be raised even more because the profile of students demanded so. Students with a professional profile had a very high level, and also we must say that for this course we didn't ask for professional qualifications, but most students were or had a BA or a BAc. I also apologize to the interpreters because sometimes one goes too fast when talking, and I know that sometimes it's difficult to follow us, and you forget that there's someone having to follow you, and you perhaps are speaking too fast. In any case, let's show now which was the impact in the media of this course when in 2005 was launched. We thought that the part having to do with marketing and dissemination was very important, especially if you want to make a pioneering experience to be known. The treatment we received in the media was incredible. Also, the UNED shared the good image the Islamic Committee has in the Spanish media, which in general is usually very well treated and enjoys a very big prestige. And we detected it with the coverage we found in the media. You may see there on TV, at the Telecinco TV channel, you may see that there was a discussion with people making very favorable statements on the course. Also, the press showed it. At El Mundo journal, we could see perhaps that the reality was perhaps reflected, but at the beginning some colleagues have told me that I had started a madrasa in my department or a Quranic school. Of course there was a bit of it, but it was just the headlines of El Mundo. And now that we are here among friends, there were some direct calls to the director of the course on behalf of some academic authorities when these headlines were read that very morning, that same morning, because it seemed that was going to introduce some kind of a revolution in university, because in any case we know that universities are a very open forum, if anyone can be present there. And we are very happy to have had the support of the Islamic Committee, and also the ABC and the Sunday magazine El Semanal, and it's thanks to the members of the Islamic Committee that we could find that echo. And also in the Islamic world, we found great support. It was a great challenge at different levels. It was a challenge because it meant bringing into university Islamic leaders to talk about Islam, especially to non-Muslim students, and also it was a challenge in terms of methodology, because this meant taking advantage of the last improvements in the internet to this end.
Vamos a hablar ahora a continuación. Esta es la introducción.
Oh, well, this was the introduction on what the experience was, and let's see which were the results. First, we detected that the students, if compared with similar courses, were very active when
Mensajes.
messages. Let's see now the profile. We were overflown. We never thought, we never could think of, because some of us had been working in distance learning for 30 or 20 years in my case, and we're like
que tenemos que entrar en la plataforma de internet.
in it all, and we had to connect to the internet at least twice a day, because students are all the time going ahead of us. On the one side, we saw that students requested mentoring, and some 20,000 messages were generated, and if they were printed, and some students which were a bit late in terms of the work, I'm going to print down all the messages generated by my fellow students, and in the end they ran out of ink in their printers, or they ran out of paper, because it was hundreds of pages. So we suggested our students, out of environmental reasons, not to do all that printing. In any case, students, for example, in 9 months, accesses that platform more than 9 times a month. Each student read around 2,300 messages, and the average number of messages sent per student. And that perhaps is not so close to reality, because there were some students who didn't participate much and some other who participated a lot. So the fun may be between 1 and 1,000 messages, because the ones who were hyperactive reached very big figures, very big numbers. Let's see a different issue, which is cooperation learning. Students learning from other students. In e-learning, that's referred to as collaborative learning.
Despacio, aquí una.
Here we have a student. We've taken off the name of the student, but he says, I've enjoyed very much the exchange which took place on uses and habits. I also want to thank those colleagues who so wisely have been answering some of the questions posted. That was something very common in this course. Students know that they learn from the contributions of other students. You've got to know that as the profile was so heterogeneous, there were very advanced students which are on specific things were true experts. So less expert students would learn from those experts, the most expert students. A very important aspect for us is that all subjects or possible subjects were dealt with. Taboos on anything having to do with the Islamic world, with the Muslim world. We have the veil, for example, Muslim trade unions. Sometimes people refer to feminism, terrorism, ablation. There was no subject left out from discussion, sometimes promoted by the students themselves. So we see that discussion without taboos or prejudices is possible without generating distortions in communication in the classroom, in the virtual classroom. I must also say that there was a very intense internal discussion which went beyond the barriers of the course itself. So there were some contributions by the students which were later on translated to the Islam.com portal in Spanish. It is the leading portal in Spanish on everything having to do with the Islamic world. That's why at Web Islam, a specific forum was created dedicated to contributions by the students. Students would write their own articles in this portal. In some cases, there were personal voluntary contributions, and some of the kinds, it was their own works. Some of the works were of a very high level, and we think those papers should be shared with others. We also detected cultural synergies of learning, and in this case, among students, many cases, close relationships, close friendships were created by students themselves. So they asked for a meeting. So that's why we talk about the synergies, because likewise in the virtual world, we read news in the sense of couples and marriages which met through the internet and then got married. We also detected that there were many students, a very significant number, who wanted to meet after having enjoyed a very intense personal relationship while sharing opinions through the course. So we mentioned that blended learning is what will be the future. And as a result, and we are coming back to the beginning, we feel that distance learning in this case, this e-learning model, promotes a constant interreligious dialogue, intercultural dialogue, which is difficult to find in
los que nos dedicamos a educación a distancia provenimos
contact learning. Most of us come from the world of contact learning and or traditional learning. And with this kind of an experience, you realize that through the internet, in the virtual world, affectionate relationships are created, sometimes stronger than in the world of traditional learning. Sometimes it is discussions are even more intense than what's the case with the voice. Also, considering that in distant learning in the internet, your opinions are there, are written, and if they are negative, they seem to distort the development of the course. But even or despite all that, here a platform for dialogue and discussion is created, a platform which we haven't found in the traditional world. We must think that we create groups. We now have got groups of 100 people. Imagine that 100 people discuss simultaneously on any subject in a country such as Spain, where there's not a big culture of discussion. You usually do not let the other to finish the sentence, and that creates a lot of problems because the Spaniard enters the conversation the moment the other is just taking some air to breathe. And the problem foreign people have is that we Spaniards are used to, in roundtable session, to holding 2 or 3 conversations at the same time, and that's more difficult in other countries. And as it is an asynchronic conversation, means that you can reach more professional levels of discussion this way. Here we have an example on the New Year, when a student congratulates the rest all for the New Year. Let this year to be blessed with peace. And then another one refers to the Muslim New Year, and it's got a different meaning in Spain, for example. And these were the constant discussions which were developed with a normal tone in the course. And that's why we allowed ourselves to reach that final conclusion, that we are confronted with an additional example where distance education through these kind of courses may promote what we understand for an alliance of the civilizations, which is just a dialogue among peers, where our differences are only minor because we all share the same values in most cases, and we also share common sense.
Se me ha pedido también que de alguna manera
I've also been asked to make some proposals. So I think that our proposals are being implemented already. In 2008, together with the Islamic Council, Junta Islámica, we intend to open up to the issues related to this course in other academic institutions, possibly with other topics, but using the same pedagogical model, the same model of cooperation with the Islamic Council and with lecturers from other Spanish universities to offer similar courses. That's all from me then. Thank you very much for your attention. And obviously, if you have any question, this is the time to ask, or when Mark finishes, perhaps that will be better. At the end, we can have a debate. Well, first of all, thank you very much for being here, and say that our sister Khadija was going to present a paper, and if Sheikh agrees with this, we'd like him to be with us at this table and then comment on the educational project that is being carried out in Matam Maulana. So perhaps you can we can tell him about this so that he can join us. So I will start off then with the issue of youth. First of all, as Germán said, Assalamu alaikum to those who are listening to us through the internet. and greetings to those of you who are here. I'd like to start with a hadith, which is by Ibn Abbas. Allah have compassion with him, when he said that one day I was mounted behind the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and he said to me, "O young man, be aware of Allah and Allah will protect you. Be aware of Allah and you will find him with you. If you ask Allah, and if you seek help in Allah." Welcome, brothers and sisters. I've decided to start with this hadith because it instills absolute monotheism, which is the essence of Islam and the basis of all young Muslims' search in our lives for the commitment with Allah. Our ideal is to seek Allah and to transmit our values to society, to share them with others. What I want to do is to give an overview of the situation of Spanish young people and then go into further detail about the situation of young Muslims, what is the current situation and how they're represented. We'll also see some data given by the Spanish Institute for Youth from February this year, which gives a profile of the values of young Spaniards in general, and this will allow us to situate ourselves in a context where we can see what their preferences are and their tastes. 28% of the Spanish population is between 15 and 29 years of age, which for studies is considered to be young. Foreign young people who are most represented in Spain are young people from Morocco, 16.1%, and Ecuador, which account for 15.7% of young people. The region with the most young people is Andalusia, which with 19.2% of all young people in the country. As far as membership of associations are concerned, only 28% of Spanish young people participate in some kind of association, religious associations, sports associations. Sports associations are the majority, of course, 37% of all those who are members of associations, and cultural associations account for 14%. And there's only 11% of the young people who belong to associations that belong to religious associations. What is interesting is that between 2005 and 2007, there's been a drop in the participation of young people in associations. That is to say, all kinds of associations: sporting, cultural, leisure, student, religious, and hiking associations. Well, why is this a social analysis? Well, what we've seen is that over these last 4 years or so, there's a model of youth being promoted, which is very individualist, and it's focused on new web platforms and the latest generation of video consoles. And what happens here is that it gives people a very high degree of satisfaction with just a click without having to move out of their homes. Now, today it would seem that young people have more friends than 5 years ago, but their model of behavior is totally different, and these new technologies are focusing a new social concept. And these new technologies favor forums, debate forums, online studies, search tools, a whole range of elements that we should take advantage of as elements for personal growth and community growth rather than as elements for social exclusion. The reason that is most widely mentioned by young people to justify their participation in associations is that they want to use their free time in activities that they enjoy. 42% of them say this, and only 8% of youth organizations offer services to social groups with problems, and only 6% to denounce social issues. As far as the association membership of associations amongst Muslim youth is concerned, we can see that they are focalized in large cities such as Madrid, Valencia, Barcelona, and they can be divided into two kinds of groups, basically. There are those associations that have been set up as young people's Muslim associations that are independent, and there are those that form part of wider or larger organizations, Islamic cultural organizations or associations, and have a working group that is devoted exclusively to youth, to promote the interrelation between their members, to strengthen the links between communities, and to teach Islamic values. I'd like to point out that, as we have said, there's been a drop in membership of associations, in different kinds of associations, and we've also realized that since the 11th of March, especially in Madrid, there has been an increase in youth and adult associations with regard to religion, especially Islamic associations. They've probably realized that the media was starting to warm up, and it was time to react, that they had to react. As far as the role of young Muslims is concerned, I'd like to point out that in general, young people are basically the future of a country. And then, depending on the values and the situation of the current youth, we will see the development of the country in 20-25 years. It will depend on the values of the young people today. And at the current time, we are characterized basically by two fundamental aspects. One is the energy that we have, and the other is how we take advantage of this energy, how we use this energy to build a better future. The energy that young people have is tremendous. Our physical and psychological capacities at this time of our lives is at its peak. And it's key for us, it's essential for us to decide how we're going to organize our future, how we want to commit ourselves to society, what we want to study, what job we want to do. This is fundamental that we do it now. Another challenge is to see how we can transmit this youthful spirit to society. If we add to this that as young Muslims, we must become committed, and young Muslims today must seek respectful areas that promote respect. The media are going to have a basic role here to help us, and if this is possible in a region in which Islam is a minority religion, with media that don't know anything about Islam, makes young people a key element in the construction of this framework of knowledge and coexistence. We must also drive forward the knowledge about real Islam towards the media, destroy the weapons that they use to attack our religion. It's not possible that 0.005% of Muslims represent 1,300 million Muslims. We can't allow the media to get away with this. And in this sense, Abu Huraira said of the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, said, avoid suspicion, because suspicion is the most false of thoughts. This means that the unfounded suspicion is the worst of man's thoughts because it accuses without knowledge and speaks without justification. If we explain to the media, not only with communiques and press releases, but with actions, what Islam represents for us, they can't possibly carry on saying the dreadful and ridiculous things that they've been saying up to now. The time will come when they know how to distinguish between the customs of a culture and peoples and what Islam says about different aspects. What they can't do is to criminalize a whole community because of the behavior of certain individuals. And this is what's happening at the current time. We are Spaniards and we are Muslims, and at the same time, in some media, we have been called the Trojan horse, the fifth column. They see us as aliens in our own country, and this is absolutely unacceptable. We can't permit this kind of totally baseless accusations, and the only thing that they provoke is that young Spaniards and young people amongst the immigrants is to try to reinforce their personality by imitating behavior which is alien to us, because they believe that, well, if the media are accusing us of this, we will reinforce our character, copying behavior which is not characteristic of this country. So this is the situation at the current time, and our behavior and our personality has to be adapted to this. So what's happened since the 11th of September, the 11th of March, and the 7th of June? Well, the people with knowledge have started to ask questions, have started to seek the reason behind what's happened. But what is the reality? What is the situation? A high rate of converts in the US, in the UK, and in France, priests who accept Islam, young people, old people, men, women. And this is part of the reality of Islam. We saw this last night when we were having dinner, and we had the chance to share a shahada here together. If Islam was a violent religion, would this have happened? I don't believe so. Why are there more and more middle-class or upper-class, university-educated women who are converting to Islam? Because they're submissive? I don't think so. And there's a clear response to this situation. Young people should be the flag of Islam. We must give the example of what Islamic behavior is. And this is a continuous jihad. Jihad understood as effort, of course, since the media haven't understood this yet. A constant effort to show society what real Islam is, far away and distance from the stereotypes that some media put forward. If we do this, it's only going to be a question of time, because their arguments can't last forever, and the message is clear: yes to coexistence, yes to peace, yes to the construction of a fair and just society. And as is usually said in these cases, in a just society there's no poverty. And as long as poverty exists, young Muslims will be there constructing the future, and not only Muslim young people, but non-Muslim young people as well. But if we carry out these activities, we will increase the well-being, justice, pluralism, peace, and solidarity of our country. And it's very interesting here, it's very appropriate to mention the hadith with which Anas told about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said, "I swear by the person in whose hands my soul is, that the servant of Allah doesn't complete his faith until he wants for his neighbor what he wants for himself." And this should be our objective, to strengthen our character and want for our neighbor what we want for ourselves, inshallah. Now I want to talk about the identity of young people as the basis for the Alliance of Civilizations. Now we've had to look at the clear role of Muslim youth. Let's look more into identity. Now, if we look at our environment, we can see that there is a great variety of forms and dresses within Islam, from Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, Morocco, the UK, and Spain. We must realize that Muslims are not distinguished by their clothes, but by the nobleness of their heart, the nobility of their heart. Identity is made up by the situation that one lives in linked to the way they understand life, the framework of a nation, with a culture that is more or less rooted in that nation. I'd like to give you an example of something that occurred to me, something that happened to me personally when I was studying a master's degree at university, and one of my classmates found out I was Muslim, and he looked at me shocked. And then they said to me, "Oh, but you're not a practicing Muslim, are you?" And I said, "Well, I practice basketball to get better." But this is the message that's been conveyed by the media, and it's very, very difficult for people to leave apart, to leave aside this message. There's a really deep-rooted stereotype of the Muslim with a long beard and a jalaba shouting and screaming, and or the women covered in black from head to toe. These are the stereotypes. It's going to be very, very difficult to break this. And we need to strengthen this part of our reality, of our situation, to prove that this is not the majority. We can understand that on the television it looks more expressive to show a Muslim with a long beard and the jalaba that I mentioned before, or a woman covered in black from head to toe, than to show some of us Muslims who are gathered here today. Because our image would be too much for the TV viewer to bear, because they don't imagine that Muslims are just ordinary people. So I think that we mustn't forget that young Spanish Muslims are accustomed to a way of understanding life, a way of observing behavior of others, which and that it's going to be very difficult for us to understand certain kind of behavior represented or promoted by other countries, and this is not representative. And within differences, the Muslim must be recognized because of his nobility and his good behavior, and not impose a model to be followed. Although for media it's easier and more attractive, we must try to break down this stereotype. And that's why young people want to build a future which is dignified for everybody. And that's why we are the basis of any pyramid which is upon which the Alliance of Civilizations is built. In the framework of these presentations, this conference, young Muslims appeal for you to take us into account in decision-making about aspects which will affect the construction of a society based on respect and justice for all different ways of understanding life. But if we are going to be representative, we need to be given participation. I would like to now offer a summary and conclusions of what I've said. When we are young, our personality and character is formed, and it's important. What is important to strengthen our link with Islam and find our commitment with society. When we are young, we must desire justice fervently, because it's when we have most energy and when we are most capable of carrying out activities and actions to favor justice and equity. We must have a great love for truth and reject falseness and hypocrisy. We must seek nobility of character, and in Islamic terms we will find this in generosity and compassion, in value and in courage, in fulfilling our promises, by being patient, by being brave, by respecting our elders, by showing courtesy and humility. And by way of conclusion, I'd like to state that for young Muslims to participate in society, they must feel comfortable in themselves. They must have the tools to be able to develop. They need a future which will allow them to develop fully. And then they will contribute to creating spaces for coexistence. But first of all, they have to develop themselves. It's not that the first waves of immigrants haven't been able to develop, and that's why they haven't contributed to society. But I think that they haven't known how to connect with society, and that's why we must recognize this error, and we must educate second generations and offer them tools. We must try to help them to help us to create a dignified situation. We must educate young people to be opinion leaders, to teach them so that they know how to behave if they are in the media. Do you imagine what the result would be if every Islamic association had focused on one young person and taught them how to deal with the media, saying, you are going to explain what we do in Ramadan to the local radio or whatever? I'm sure that the situation of Islam today would be very, very different. So we must give these people training. We must prepare them. And what about coexistence? Well, this is like an equation. If you're okay, I'm okay. And if the boat sinks, we all sink. And that's why we've got to go hand in hand and not try to block each other's way. And finally, I'd like to point out the importance of self-criticism. We don't have a sense of self-criticism. We quite often blame other people. And so the blame is ours as well as it is others' people's. Muslims sometimes don't admit criticism because we feel that this would mean that the Quran and the Hadith are wrong. But this is not the case, because we should maybe think that sometimes we have interpreted them more badly. We need more self-criticism, and to form and train leaders, we need to instill in them the sense of self-criticism, because the real leader is always self-critical. And finally, I'd like to point out that Islam offers a dignified life which is fair for everybody, and this is what we would like to invite you to discover. And so when that's why we're telling you all this, and we thank you for listening to us, because today, if you give the first step, you will offer responsibilities to young people in your circle. I would like to tell those people who are in the meeting of the WIPL, and I haven't seen any young people in the World Islamic Leadership meeting. I would like to see young people here contributing to the decisions which are going to affect our future, and I'd like this to be included in the conclusions of their meeting. I started with a hadith, and I'm going to finish with a hadith. Abu Huraira, Allah be compassionate with him, stated that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whomever helps the believer when he has a problem of his world, Allah will solve one of his problems on the day of the resurrection. Whomsoever helps someone in difficulties, Allah will help him in this world. And the next Allah helps his servant his servant helps his brother. Thank you. Bismillah, and thank you very much for your attention.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa alihi wa sahbihi.
Alabado sea Dios y la paz.
Let God be praised, as well as his messengers like Prophet Muhammad. We would like to thank the organizers of this seminar from the deep depths of our heart. And the Prophet, may the peace be with him, said, those who do not know how to thank people will not know how to thank God. This opportunity which was given to us allows us to meet our brethren and also our brethren in mankind. And they are brethren we love and we appreciate very much. I would like to tell you, I would like to thank my friend and brother, Professor Mansur Escudero, for the great work he's developing on behalf of Islam in Spain. So that's why we came here as soon as we could, answering his call. And he insisted in me making a short speech at this afternoon session. Some of the delegates and participants, while we were talking this morning, proposed me to talk about education in this environment. The truth is that I felt a bit ashamed, and I said, "Whoa, it wouldn't be the time." But then I gathered some courage, and I said to myself, "You've got to talk about these." So that's why I talk in general terms about the Alliance of Civilizations and intercultural dialogue. But this afternoon, he insisted on me one more time for me to talk about education and promotion of the Alliance of Civilizations. And that's why I'm going to talk about it now. I'm sorry if I improvise because I haven't prepared any material beforehand. There's no need to repeat that. Of course, there will always be the need to bring closer together different points of view, because it is known that makes human beings to enjoy an unanimous perspective. But the value of wisdom and knowledge in Islam is very much transcendent. And in order to be very brief, I'm going to mention 3 examples inspired in the most sacred Quran and the Sunnahs and the tradition of Prophet Muhammad. May the peace be with him. The first example is the moment of creation, the moment he ordered the angels to prostrate before Adam in order to show the dignification of human being. And the first thing he did was to instruct, to teach Adam all the terms of knowledge, of absolute knowledge. And that shows the value, the transcendence of wisdom for changing the destiny of man. And the second example is that one of the highest missions of the Prophet, apart from preaching the message of Islam, is teaching us and teaching human beings the tone of Islam, the instructions, the statements in Quran. But also the Quran refers to wisdom in general terms. And here is when I want to approach the subject I had in mind: education and its meaning, its implications for mankind, for the human being. Even if they look as different questions, they complement each other and in an intrinsic fashion. The third example, is that God may be highlighted when referring to the treatment Muslims should give each other, and with regards to their fellow human beings, he authorized us to eat the meat of dogs in case of need. This is one of the allowances, of the permissions God gave men. And Muslim wise men have studied these cases corresponding with to the emergencies in which a human being might find him or herself. There are 3 very short examples, but very eloquent on the need of learning and wisdom in Islamic culture. This knowledge, which should cover all spheres and all areas, all fields. And specifically referring to the treatment human beings should give each other mutually, independently of the differences in their points of view. All these training, these plans for enabling and skill breeding, if it's not followed by a translation into true actions, into something material, has no value. So that's why the messengers of God, the prophets, may the peace of God be with them, turn them into the messengers who transmitted to human beings behaviors and forms of life which could improve their lives. The last of such educational models, which was the closing of the cycle of prophecies, and which should be eternal by the commandments of God up to the day of judgment, is the educational model promoted by Prophet Muhammad, may peace be with him, which is reflected in the Sunnahs of the sacred Quran, and also in the comments of lawmakers and Muslim al-Faqirs and the Muslim judges and wise men. This education has as one of its main characteristics that it stems from a series of principles and foundations, but following flexible procedures, which have allowed for Islam to adapt to any kind of spatial and temporal coordinate, and also following the tradition of Orthodox Caliph Ali bint Ali, we can refer to something which was consistent. Educate your children through models different to your own, because the time they will live through is different to yours. That educational model, which answers the ideals of Muslim pedagogy in general, may be synthesized and summarized in the sought for well-being and the sought for paradise, and refer to all the manifestation of worship. But like in the case of medicine, it's also got its own areas and specialties. There's general medicine and fields of specialization in each different moment and space. And in order to achieve this diversity and specialization, there is no need to mention or multiply examples of paradigms, unless it is to give an example, a reference, and show it before the participants as a project which, of course, may be questioned and improved. And this example would have, of course, its own virtues as an educational model, but also its defects. I repeat that it would have its virtues and defects and weaknesses. And starting from this approach, as the believer is considered to be the mirror of his or her brother, and Islam tells us that all Muslims are like one single body. That's why that's why I answer the call made by brother Mansour. for me to talk to you with such brief words on this project we refer to as the project of the City of Education in Mauritania. But it is not an improvised project. It's got its own precedents. And it's got a present and a future which look very promising. And with the grace of God and the help of God, we will work steadily in order to achieve the objectives designed. The recent story of this project, when I talk about recent history, I'm not referring to the historic precedent of Islam, which are too far away for the current and future generations, because the Andalusian cultural legacy we have in Mauritania is very rich.
Por supuesto, lleva la huella.
Of course, it's got the track and the traces of the culture coming from Eastern Islam, but our aim is not to make an academic speech, but we stem from reality. And we say that it is an experience which has been implemented during the last 50 years. And I was one of the students who benefited from this project. And also there are other colleagues and new generations who continue learning from this school. And this project was an answer to a concern, a very simple concern in formal terms, but very transcendental in its inner depths. We were, and we are still, a Bedouin people under French colonialism and occupation. We're fearful of school and all its nuances, and we shaked with fear when we were told to settle down in urban areas, in urban settlements. But some wise people, very far-sighted, Mr. Malik, may God bless him, Sheikh Mahmoud al-Bisri, they have seen that the condition of Bedouins in the desert prevented them from benefiting from process and progress, and that civilization required settlement, and that education and teaching needs two requirements, or has two requirements: a legal requirement which helps the human being to keep his or her creed and faith, and a more secular aspect, profane, which follows the trends of the current times. And that batch of people who follow that pioneering initiative, which was made up of 30 or 40 people, took the lead to settle down, build homes, and opposing the tradition of the ancestors who were just mere nomads. And they decided to settle in a specific place and decided to build their own school for them to learn French, and at the same time coupled it with the teaching of Islam, the Quranic school of that time. And these were the initial steps of that project. and the progressive development of that city or that project. And now it's reached a figure of more than 3,000 inhabitants. There are different nationalities there present. Some of the descendants of some of the children of some of our friends here are attending classes at that school. It's like the seed which flourished in that remote extension of Al-Andalus. And they enjoy that specific taste that is to be found in Andalusians. And the rest of the history, or perhaps the great challenge we have ahead of us, is to adapt the contents, the pedagogic contents, to modern needs. And that's what is demanded from us right now, to manage to build a model of a human being who's good, who follows the example and the paradigm of Muhammad, who was our great master and who taught us that the human being is the best creature, and that Islam, if understood as a universal religion, is the best message sent by God to his children. And this noble message answers and takes care of all the needs and the potentials of the human being,
tanto a nivel de esos instintos,
both in terms of instincts and in terms of its concerns and cultural needs and everything inside their hearts and mind. Little by little, this process
se fue renovando constantemente,
constantly renewed, following everything which was appearing on the run. And, for example, some of those needs,
cuando éramos
when we were Bedouins and nomads in the desert, we must make the decision to create a center, a professional training center for them to learn how to make a living. Another challenge is that we, our children,
una formación constante,
need a constant training and constant teaching, and we must take care of their specific needs.
supuesto que no
And of course, they will not exactly reproduce the educational model which was infused upon
su realidad específica,
ascertain their own needs and the challenges they will face in the future.
uno de estos desafíos también
These challenges is also that we were a people condemned to isolation
tanto en el norte
هنالك حاجز الصحراء
in the north, where the area covered by the desert is very wide, an enormous desert which is crossed every month just by one camel or one caravan. And also in the south, when we talk about the cultural differences with the black Muslims of sub-Saharan Muslims, Africa. So for many centuries we lived isolated.
por la gracia de Dios y afortunadamente ya derribamos los muros de este aislamiento.
فهذه تحديات
Estos
Put down the barriers of that of such an isolation. These are the new challenges we've got to face without losing our ethical code. Of course, there are many questions, many elements to be taken into account, and that's why we should all cooperate in order to find the adequate solutions. And once we've mentioned such questions, we think with the grace of God, next year to organize a seminar on this subject. I'm sorry because I'm just improvising and I haven't taken any notes, and so that's why my ideas seem to be so ill-linked. But I'm here to answer your suggestions. Let God guide us towards the right way. Thank you very much for your attention.
لا هذه بركة الشيخ. Me dice que es el esfuerzo del intérprete. Digo, no, estas son la baraka de nuestro jeque.
He was praising the work of the interpreter, but the interpreter was saying that it was just the charisma of the sheikh.
La pregunta que le plantea, ¿cuántos años tiene?
Is how old is this book?
قرأ 50 سنة 58
Unos 50 años.
2 years.
En la escuela coránica.
School?
أشياء متفاوتة ما هو تاريخ واحد.
Pues este archivo.
This archive is more or less from the same time, 50 years.
حفر البير بعد 50 لأن الصحراء تبدأ دائما نقطة ماء. نقطة ماء هي بدأت من
El punto de referencia en el desierto.
The reference point in the desert, which justifies the settlement, is a well. Where there's a well, there's life.
Y lo mismo ha pasado con la Meca.
The same happened with Mecca when Abraham dug the well of Zamzam more than 4,000 years ago. He's been asked about the number of students. There are two groups. One of them is currently studying at the Quranic school. It's more or less 700 students. And the rest, who are scattered through other places or other locations in order to learn from other areas of Islamic thinking, around 150.
Le está preguntando cuántas personas cada año llegan.
He's asking how many people are able of memorizing Quran every year. Well, we do not pay so much attention to statistics or data.
Lo que importa es el fruto.
What's important for us is the fruit of the effort we develop. But don't worry. We started doing some records and files of what's being done. The best result was obtained last year, 46 of them. I'm afraid this figure went a little bit down this year, and I hope next year it will go up again. It's a great improvement.
لهم هذا السائل هو من أهلي قريبي.
Saying my friend, my colleague is one of my fellow citizens, and these questions is just making them in order to make them clear for you, for me to explain to you further things I didn't say in the beginning. But I would like to listen to questions from someone else. Sorry, which is the adaptations or the pedagogic adaptations the Muslim world should follow in order to get closer to the young people?
مقرراتهم التربوية والدراسية وفق الواقع خاصة الواقع الشباب.
هذا كله هذا سؤال كبير.
Es una pregunta muy.
It's a very interesting question, and perhaps it would need of more time for it to be explained. But I will answer you very briefly. Always, all adaptations made have got to have their own reference in divine teaching and covering current needs, both in material and spiritual terms. That's a criteria we follow. And I'm going to quote a versicle from the Al-Fatah. We worship you, and you are the one we are asking help for. So in order to ask for something from God, you've got to invoke him, because in Arab, nasahin means asking for help is not just requesting it. It means Lanun, who's from our group, means that you are already a member of the community and you've got to assume all its creed. And of course, there's a divine blessing which always covers the community when you belong to the community. And of course, all adaptations should take care of the human beings' freedom, as long as Islamic dispositions are respected. Of course, you can do any kind of adaptation in order to answer social, economic needs, intellectual needs, while respecting this parameter. The same like in the cooperation we hold with athletes, politicians, being clear, transparent, and with education, and of course respecting the legal framework. Goodness among the human beings is what follows what makes us follow God's education. Which is the criterion adopted from this educational community with regards to new technologies?
الذي تعتمدونه في هذه المدرسة من أجل إدماج وسائل التكنولوجيا الحديثة كالحاسوب وغيره.
هي الوسائل الحديثة إنما هي آلات.
Todos los medios tecnológicos.
All technological resources are, like the word says, the means. They are tools which help us, which can be used for the good of people or to make harm. An example is this microphone. We're using it for disseminating thought and wisdom, but it can also be used for insulting and humiliating people. So, as long as your will is seeking the good, the means is not important. And God in the Quran says, do in order to do good. And the Prophet, may the peace be with him, said, when he wanted to choose a muezzin, he chose the one who had a powerful voice, and he was Bilal, the Abyssinian, because apart from the power of his voice, he had a very singing voice, a charming voice. And of course, we have loudspeakers today, so that's even better. But the question today is to know if this tool, this instrument, will help us to achieve goodness or not, because it can be fruitful and help the community and human beings. Of course, when the good is the aim we have, you don't need to reflect even on the tool or the instrument. Of course, we acknowledge our drawbacks with regards to the use of new technologies, because we lag behind. Sometimes we think here we are in a different planet and in a different civilization, but of course it's a material lag, not intellectual. We're human beings and we are sentient beings. And starting from dignity, we can think and reflect the same, independently on the means. And of course, we can be pioneers in other environments, not just worldly environments. So the tools and the means, of course, you should always have in mind whether they are going to be used for the good or for the evil. So sometimes people think of religion like something which hampers thinking. And we see it not just in Islam, we also see in Judaism, Christianity, and in other creeds. But this problem has also widespread to Muslims. And it is true that we went through a period of splendor, and perhaps we are still in decadence. It's a mistake thinking that we cannot get out of that lethargy. And there are other kinds of Muslims who reject technologies, and that's also a problem. And they have renounced to the ethical code and moral code.
And so our appeal is to follow the road straight, the road of those who are well guided, not those who have invoked wrath, and neither those who have lost their way. Our middle course, the concept of the Quran that we have to preach is moderation, and the moderate and tolerant spirit, always. Sheikh, I am surprised and happy to find out about this project, to learn about this project. My heart is happy to see how knowledge is flourishing. It's an oasis in our times. I would like to know, in the classes, what arts are taught to the children. How do they develop in the tasawwur? And also whether, in order to convey this experience, you have made some kind of documentary, or how are you transmitting it, if you have other kind of forms of transmitting this? Thank you very much for your sincere feelings, and especially for this moral support, because this is what gives us the strength to go on, because these feelings of purity that reflect what the Muslim feels towards his fellows in Islam, and goodness and good people in all human beings, people like you, and people independently of their religion. Now, to answer your question, we're not here to make any kind of publicity. We just want to reflect this situation as it exists, with all its characteristics. Obviously, we recognize the lack of material and the backwardness, and that we don't teach many arts, because the spirit, the Bedouin spirit, is still dominant in Mauritania. there were controversies, and there still are controversies, about whether it's licit to play music or not. So very patiently we try to respond to this kind of debate. We have an order of priorities, and we always welcome any ideas that help us to progress. As I said, and I will repeat, education is like a medicine in general. And if I try to think about translating the art, I'm not going to do it here to the sons of Al-Andalus, because they have a special grace in this sense. And there is a famous work about Artam al-Hamama, the collar of the dove, and this was ironic about people who about those who wanted to prohibit music. But we are Bedouins, and we are a very long way from Al-Andalus, and our concern is our reality. The maximum artistic expression in our case was the calligraphy. I've been thanked, and I've said that we are your humble servants, Sheikh. Any more questions? I would like to make a comment at this point, at this stage, because I can say this is very moving for everybody, I can see. And I would like to ask Herman, who's sitting here at the table as well, about his view, what he thinks about what the Sheikh has told us, his educational model, his... Could you tell us a little bit more about what your impressions are of what the Sheikh has said? I found it very significant, very moving, and I'd like to know what your impressions are, Herman. Thank you very much, Hashim. I'm just going to give you my humble opinion, stating that I share the spirit that is present here very obviously in this hall at the moment, because of this highly realistic experience, highly human experience of an educational model based on education in values, which is what is really important. And in principle, I don't really have very much more to add, just to say that human experience that we may have had in this educational coexistence, this educational experience in my field, the course that I organized and that I've mentioned, and the human experience at a human level, it's been very, very enriching. The fact that I'm here, that I've been able to come to this seminar on this topic, well, the great advantage is that I'm here to learn, and I'm going to leave with my spirits high and enriched by all the experiences I'm living through here. This is my humble opinion of somebody who's here to learn, who's spending these days with the people from the Islamic Council. Well, if there are no more questions, then we will adjourn this session. Thank you.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim.
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. Hemos llegado felizmente a este final del Seminario de Alianza de Civilizaciones, Alianza por la Paz. Solo quiero agradecer todo el esfuerzo que todos habéis hecho por hacer una reflexión en profundidad del estado actual en que se encuentra este proyecto tan necesario para contrarrestar la violencia, el enfrentamiento que hay en el mundo. Y quiero felicitar tanto al equipo que ha estado trabajando por detrás, invisible, pero tan necesario para que las cosas marchen, como a los que habéis participado como ponentes y asistentes, preguntando, reflexionando, debatiendo y finalmente llegando a estas conclusiones que han sido trasladadas a la Secretaría General del Liderazgo Islámico Mundial, han sido asumidas. Creo que debemos todos congratularnos de que una organización tan importante como el Liderazgo Islámico Mundial haya sabido entender y asumir como propias las conclusiones
and taken on board these conclusions that have been drawn from the debates in this seminar. And I would like to congratulate all of you for the tremendous effort that you have made. I would like to greet those who are with us through internet, the whole seminar, and the debate in the WIPL has been broadcast online, has been webcast. And I think it is important to point out that an organization should be so transparent in the working method, in its working methodology and its debates. Every debate that has taken place here and in the WIPL, in the Secretariat General, has been webcast live on the internet, and they will be available offline as well for anybody who wants to consult them at any time in the future. I would especially like to thank those of you who've come from abroad, Hajj al-Sheikh Malane al-Kabir, who also comes from Matarrana, from those of you who've come from Argentina, those of you who've come from all over Spain. Thank you all very, very much for the effort that you have made. And I hope that this seminar is just the first step in a process which will have continuity in the future. Now I'm going to give the floor to our colleague to read the conclusions. The Decalogue for the Alliance of Civilizations. The assumption taken on by the UN of the procedure of these Alliance of Civilizations has taken on great momentum, and many groups have pledged support for it. And for this reason, a group of experts have met in Cordoba in the framework of a seminar called Alliance for Civilizations, Alliance for Peace, organized by the Islamic Committee or Council, and has come up with a series of conclusions which will be put forward to the US. These resolutions are the following. 1, to express that the desire for peace should be decisive as an instrument as a goal in political actions carried out by national and international public authorities. Include civil society in all spheres of the development of the Alliance of Civilizations. Demand that countries who have pledged support for the Alliance of Civilizations, that they should be coherent with regard to the religious freedom of minorities. 4, to promote the support of an international assembly of cultures. 5, to create an international observatory against Islamophobia. To review audiovisual products, publications, dictionaries and textbooks, and style book for journalists. 6, to promote interfaith debate and support the groups working in this field. 7, to promote ethical, halal, financial and banking products which tend towards a fair redistribution of wealth. 8, to give political and institutional support for projects and initiatives that promote gender equality. 9, to promote and support Internet in developing countries, creating areas on the space for on the net for mutual knowledge. And 10, the recovery of the memory of Al-Andalus as the paradigma of the Alliance of Civilizations, which will be materialized in measures such as preferential granting of Spanish citizenship to the descendants of Al-Andalus of the Moriscos, support for the Declaration of Shawan, support for the candidacy of flamenco and Andalusi music as intangible UNESCO World Heritage, and the organization of the First World Meeting for the recovery of the historic memory of Al-Andalus. Well, we therefore adjourn our meeting. I would just like to end by thanking the technicians and especially the interpreters who have worked very, very hard. Thank you.